Two-headed right, two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one-headed right. Two heads are better than one.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to our channel. My name is Evalyn.
My name is Monty.
And together we are the Two-Headed Writer, a father-daughter writing team from Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Yes, and once a week, although it's been longer than that at this point, considerably longer. It's been a month, but in regular times, once a week, we get together to catch each other up on our writing journeys. Evalyn has gone back to school. She is in Iowa City, the most famous city in all of the United States right now, for nefarious reasons that make us very nervous and worried. But there she is, going to college, mostly online from her dorm room.
Totally online now.
Oh, totally online from her dorm room. Okay, so here's Evalyn from her bunker. I'm at home in Stillwater, Oklahoma, teaching college algebra at OSU in person with a mask on. And we are getting together once a week, as I said, to talk about our writing journeys. And we're glad that you have decided to join us.
So we're switching back to kind of our old modality here, recording on Zoom. We had been sort of aware of each other's writing progress and we weren't really like catching each other up. But since we're no longer living in the same house, we're not as caught up. So things that we are catching each other up on, plus you guys, we are each working on a book together. I have school stuff that I'm doing, and then we're working on a book that we wrote together. We are still sort of in the querying trenches there.
So Inklings of Ethermore we've been querying, and last time we spoke, an agent had requested a full manuscript. Well, we have heard back from that agent, and she has passed on representation. So that our one hope has been thoroughly crushed. Our one glimmer of hope that we knew of. Other agents have also rejected our query letter since then, and I need to get in there and kind of update the database and see how many are left that we might expect to hear from, because I think it's down to just a handful left from our last query. But we still do have some queries out there that we could get a request for pages from. You never know. One of my critique partners said that she got a request for a full manuscript from somebody that she'd queried like 2 years ago. And then suddenly, send us your manuscript. And she's like, what? I'm revising it right now. So.
And we also still have plenty of agents still in our database, and we can keep submitting.
We can just keep doing rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, we haven't really discussed who are we going to do any more revising, but I don't think you want to without some specific reason to revise. And the only thing I could think of would be just, taking a long enough break from it than if we read it ourselves and be like, oh, this could be better. But I think we're at a point where we just don't know how to make it better on our own. So, Evalyn, I would love to hear how you're doing with your novel.
Haha. So work on that, slow down a little bit because I started class again and trying to figure out my schedule. Schedule is changing. Now everything's totally online. So that'll make it easier in a way to like standardize how I'm doing stuff. I no longer have to rush in the 20 minutes between classes all the way across campus to get back to my dorm room. So that'll be lovely. Very excited about that. So yeah, I have been working on it a little bit though. I have my outline back up in my dorm room right there.
Ah,
And I have
there's a lot of little pink ones. Those are chapters, aren't they?
they're not finished chapters, but they are like conceptualized chapters. That's how I kind of keep track of what's going on. I don't know right now if I'm actually going to be able to submit to Pitch Wars, which was my goal, but I did not get as far as I wanted in the second half of August to necessarily be able to do that. We'll
I was
see.
wondering about that. When is Pitch Wars?
Pitch Wars is at the end of this month. Last week of this month is when it starts.
Okay.
That's when submission windows open.
For our viewers who don't know, what is Pitch Wars?
Yeah, so Pitch Wars is a writing mentorship sort of contest. They select mentors from the industry. Some of them are published authors, some of them are previous Pitch Wars mentees. They all, for the most part, are very involved and knowledgeable about the process of getting your book agented and then editored. So last month they announced the list of mentors, and my book is YA, so I read all of the bios of the YA mentors. I kind of have a list going in my head, but later this week, or early next week, maybe, it's like the 12th, I think, the mentors drop their wish lists. And so it's a list of everything they're interested in reading and like the genres and story tropes that they want to help authors with. And so based on that, you can select, I believe, 2 mentors to submit. Basically, it's a query package too. And like an agent, they may request to see more of your manuscript. After that, there's a big announcement on the Pitch Wars website with all of the mentees that have been selected. And then between then and the end of like January, maybe February, I don't have the timeline memorized, obviously, you can tell. You're working with your mentor to polish your manuscript so that you can submit it to the agent showcase at the end of the round. And basically, you just put it up. They put a package up on the Pitch Wars website, and agents who are interested can contact you. It's there to foster a relationship between experienced people in the publishing industry and unexperienced, unagented authors. And so I am interested in being part of one of those things as someone who's quite young comparative to most authors. It would be helpful to have like advocates who aren't just my agent or advocates who aren't just my editor when it comes to writing things, right? I've got you.
Well, especially since you don't have an agent or an editor, it might be helpful to have the advocate to help you get to that point.
Yeah, yes, but also in terms of like
just building a network.
Building a network and like having people out there who have done the thing before. So like I could get an agent, right? I still have to learn how to work with that agent, right? And I can talk to that agent so much, but sometimes, you know, you just need to ask somebody who's not them, like, hey, is this normal? I'm confused by this thing, right? And I feel like since I'm so young, because I am really young to be doing this, like most authors don't get published at 19. And I'm not going to get published at 19, but right, but most authors don't do that.
Or they're not even at a point where they're trying.
I am a little bit concerned, like that people will try to take advantage of me or think that I'm naive and they can like right? I want supporters, and the mentor-mentee sort of relationship is something that would be specifically beneficial to me, just I think because of like my age.
So
So if I don't get to it this year, I'll definitely submit next year. There are just some mentors that I'm particularly excited about the possibility of working with.
so when you see their wish list going up, that might that boost your resolve if you see somebody's looking for something that's exactly like what you're writing?
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, I'm boosted. I'm like excited. I want to do this, right? I just don't know if I can get my project to the level where I'm like, yeah, I can't fix more of this on my own, right? I don't want to try
Yeah,
to get I want to work with these people, but I don't want to send them bad writing.
yeah.
Um, so
I was kind of thinking we'd end up both doing it this time, each with our respective novels. I'm not sure if I'll be at that point, but I might have a better chance than you in terms of how far along I am. Where can we go to find out that information?
pitchwars.org.
Pitchwars.org. All right. Well, I can talk about my book.
Yeah, go for it.
But first, this Brave New Girls. This is the anthology that has my short story in it. And I got it. I read it to your mom as we were driving home from dropping you off. And she liked it. So that was cool. I don't know. Have you had a chance to read it?
No.
Oh, I'm just showing the illustration and the title. Save the Fighting Mormons. Of course, there's one spot where your mom goes, um, how would she know that? And I'm like, she probably wouldn't. Darn. So, yeah, now there's a thing to fix, but it's too late. On my novel, Danica Dunn, I am working back through it with help of a critique group. I think the last time we talked, I was still revising a draft, and this time I am going back through. I'm not really calling it a new draft, but I'm going back through from the beginning to sort of just clean it up. So I've put all the little pieces together in the right order. I am finding that I still want to shift things around a little bit. Maybe I could have a draft ready for Pitch Wars. Now that we've talked about that, I'm kind of thinking, I want to get myself going, get it done, see if I can participate. Let's talk about what you're learning about writing in your writing classes.
Well, so I'm not really in like a writing class this year. Well, sort of.
What about your writing workshop?
Yeah, but that's more like a feedback thing than like a class structure thing. It's literally just a workshop, right?
Yeah, but that's how you learn to write. You
Okay.
write, you get feedback. That's
Yeah.
really where the rubber hits the road, so
But
to
we're not
speak.
getting like lectured on form or something, right? We're just it's up to us whatever we want to write.
Well, what
Uh,
are you writing for your workshop?
I don't know yet. I don't workshop for like another 3 weeks, so
Oh, so you're just showing up to give feedback to your fellow students right now.
yes.
And in 3 weeks, they will be reading something you wrote. Well, what is the format? Do you write? Do you submit short stories, chapters from a novel? What could it be?
Any fiction. Any fiction as long as it fits in the word like or the page count.
What's the page count?
Um 30 pages. It's something words and then the max is 30 pages. I'm also in 2 other major related courses. I'm in Intro to Literary Publishing. That one's exciting because we are basically putting together our own literary magazine over the course of the semester. So this week we discussed concepts and titles for the magazine. Next week we have to finalize that and then also decide which sections are going in. So like, are we doing fiction and poetry and nonfiction? Are we gonna do drama, or right? And like what our parameters are for those, right? So like if we're doing fiction, are we like accepting only speculative fiction, or like, right? And then the week after that, our call for submissions goes out. My friends, there are 3 publishing classes right now, and my friends are split between the other 2. And so they'll be on the staffs of their own magazines. And I have to submit for that class, I have to submit to one of the other 2 magazines. So I have to figure out something to submit based on their.
The different sections of the same class submit to each other's magazines. They're required, so that way you know you're going to have some submissions. But other students
Understand both sides of the process.
Yeah. But submissions, I assume, would be open to other students as well.
The last class that I'm taking that is major related is Modern British Children's Literature, which is exciting. We are currently talking about fairy tales, which is something that we talked about on this channel before. We're not talking about voice, although we are reading from different editors, right? They're like, and studying them like one by one. So like we're doing Perot on Tuesday. Yes, also on Tuesday. I am in the first presentation group for that class, and we have these supplementary readings that we have to do, which are like essays about craft and stuff. And so my group has to present over some chapters out of the book The Morphology of a Folktale by Vladimir Propp. And he has an entire classification of fairy tales, where his hypothesis is that every fairy tale as a genre is like takes the same form, and that there are 31 different basic plot points that he calls functions. And not every single fairy tale has all 31, but the 31 plot points, when put into a fairy tale, always appear in a specific order. And so we had to come up with a way to illustrate the concepts to the class. And the book has examples of each of these 31 functions, and like it'll be like, okay, so like here's this function, the villain tricks the hero, right? And then it's like the villain could do this or this or this, and then gives examples of the different things, right? So it shows like a full spectrum, but there's not like necessary, they're not like shown in relation to each other other than in their broadest senses, right? So we were like, what if we wrote a story that had all 31 of these functions in order so that you could identify them in relation to one another?
Well, imagine, did it get redundant? Like, are there like more than one function that serves a particular purpose in the story? Like, the villain tricks the hero, but the villain could also kill the hero, not kill the hero, but wound the hero. I don't know what the 31 functions are, but there might be like 5 different ones that involve the villain messing with the hero, and then you have to have all of those in your story. Did you run into any redundancies like that?
Not really. It
No?
actually, we kept being like, oh my gosh, it's writing itself. Because we would like, oh, then this should happen, right? And then like logically this happens, and then it's like, oh, well, that falls under this next category of function, right? So for example, we were like,
I want to see this list.
Mhm.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah,
Can you send me the list?
yeah. So There's one where the hero meets somebody, I don't remember their title, who has the potential to give them help in the form of sometimes a magical object, sometimes an animal. So they meet them, they help them, and then they're rewarded with help in return, right? Those are 3 functions. And so we were like, okay, we want to do the magical animal thing. We came up with this idea of a magical glowing pig. And so we were like, okay, meets the magical glowing pig is trapped. So he helps the magical glowing pig get out of the trap. The magical glowing pig glows because we were like, the glowing pig could like scare away these spiders. But then we were like, oh, well, now he has to go to the spider kingdom and it's in this dark cave. So the way that the magical pig could help is that it could glow and lead him through the cave, right? And we were like, all of those pieces were there and they just slid very cleanly into the function. Yeah, so there are different like categories of confrontation between different kinds of villains, and they could be all be the same villain, but like it's the villain being the antagonist in different ways. Like at the beginning it's through trickery, and then it's through direct confrontation, and then it's through pursuit, and then it's through a false claim believed by a group of people.
I'm wondering, and I don't expect you to be able to answer this, but I'm wondering how specific this is to fairy tales. Like, could you take a random movie, for example, and build it out of elements from the 31 functions? Or because the movie doesn't tell a fairy tale, it's probably not going to fit that paradigm.
I mean, yeah, I feel like you could take those functions and use them to describe any story, but they would not necessarily always fall in that specific order that they do in a fairy tale. You could even describe my book, which I'm describing as fairy tale-esque. You could take that and you could, you could apply some of these functions to it. There would be things that the functions didn't cover simply because the plot is a lot more stretched out, right?
Yeah.
Or there would be sections that are repeated that you could use those functions to maybe describe multiple sections, but it wouldn't be the order. It's the order of the functions that is the real key to this theory.
Because we were talking about fairy tale voice and how you know you're reading a fairy tale because it sounds like a fairy tale. I wonder if the order of the functions here contributes to that. And we weren't thinking about like the underlying structure of the story in terms of that making it feel fairy tale-ish.
I think especially the very beginning functions. So the first set of functions is there's a family member who has either left, died, or is absent from the family group. Then the main character is issued an instruction that they end up not following somehow. That leads to an opportunity for the villain to enter the story. When the villain enters the story, at first they just gather information about the character and then use the information they've gathered to trick the character in some way.
I'm picturing Little Red Riding Hood as you speak through these. It's almost like you're describing that, but yeah. Go ahead.
They use it to trick the character in some way that leads to another family member or the same family, a family member in want of something. And then the character has to get that thing. Right? That's very Red Riding Hood. You're right. That was one of the ones that we immediately latched onto. Is like, oh, yeah.
Yeah. It also seems like you might have to stretch a little bit. Like, oh, in this fairy tale, when this happens, it kind of fits this function over here. But you might have to stretch a little to make it fit.
Yeah, so the way that I'm wording them is not the way that they are on the sheet. On the sheet, they're very purposefully worded to be as vague and as broad a category as possible. And then there's like sub-example categories of different ways that these could be enacted. And then under each of those are specific examples from actual fairy tales. They did only use 100 fairy tales in their research. So, but he was like, if we were to add more fairy tales, yeah, maybe we would add more functions, but I still think that even those functions that we did add would find their own slot within the order. So that's the thing that I learned this week, the most interesting thing I learned this week. All right, so that is all that we have to discuss this week. If you liked this video and you want to keep following us on our writing journey, remember to click that subscribe button. Comment down below, what is your favorite fairy tale? We will be back next week with another video, fingers crossed. But until then, remember,
Two heads are better than one.